Jacob Reed left Oklahoma with $200 and a tank of gas, a warrant waiting in the county courthouse, and enough regrets to fill his past. He pointed his truck toward Arizona. Certain distance could erase his name, believing new roads meant new beginnings without ever having to change. He crossed through Texas by midnight and New Mexico by dawn, leaving behind broken promises and everyone he'd done wrong. But guilt has a way of traveling faster than any engine can, and every mirror showed the same reflection, no matter where he ran. The desert stretched forever beneath a burning sky, and every mile kept asking him what exactly he was trying to leave behind. He was the man who couldn't outrun God, no matter how far he drove, no matter how many state lines passed beneath him, or how lonely the highways grew. Couldn't outrun God, because mercy runs faster than fear, and grace has a way of finding you even when you're disappearing. Now every road reminds us love never stops the chase for the man who couldn't outrun God. Found work outside Tucson, loading freight behind a rail yard, sleeping in a rundown trailer, trying to keep his wounded heart hard. The days became routine enough to almost silence the past, until one Sunday morning a church bell carried through the desert grass. The sound felt strangely familiar, like something from another life, like Mama's Bible on the kitchen table, or her prayers every night. He hadn't thought about her in years, or the faith she tried to plant, but some seeds survive the drought long after people think they can't. The wind swept through the mesquite as the bell rang once again, and something deep inside him began to slowly bend. He was the man who couldn't outrun God, no matter how far he drove, no matter how many state lines passed beneath him, or how lonely the highways grew. The man who couldn't outrun God, because than fear, and grace has a way of finding you even when you're disappearing. Now every road reminds us love never stops the chase for the man who couldn't outrun God. That afternoon he walked inside and sat in the very last pew. The preacher spoke of Jonah and a man who ran from truth, and smiled and said, some people think distance can hide them from grace. And Jacob felt every word land like it had been aimed straight at his face. He was the man who couldn't outrun God, and thank the Lord he couldn't, because redemption met him on a road where no one else would have looked for him. The man who couldn't outrun God found freedom on his knees when he stopped running from the Savior who never stopped pursuing him. Now every sunrise reminds him how far grace will go for the man who couldn't outrun God. The desert glowed beneath the evening light as he called home for the first time in years. And somewhere beyond the horizon, mercy smiled through the tears. The sign said Nashville, 100 miles, but it felt a whole lot farther than that. When you're carrying 15 years of silence and mistakes you can't take back. The truck rolled through the darkness as rain danced across the glass, and every mile marker seemed to ask me why I'd waited this long at last. My brother hadn't spoken to me since the day our father died. A fight over pride and bitterness neither one of us could justify. The years kept building distance like fences across a field, and every chance to make it right became easier to leave unhealed. The radio faded to static as lightning lit the sky. And somewhere between regret and hope, I whispered my first prayer in a long time. I was 100 miles from forgiveness and a lifetime from the man I should have been. 100 miles from forgiveness, wondering if grace could still let me in. Just a broken heart driving toward a chance to become a brother again. Now every highway reminds me mercy begins 100 miles from forgiveness. I remembered summer afternoons working fences with my dad. The lessons he tried teaching us back before things turned bad. He always said that family was something you don't walk away from, but anger has a way of making fools out of even the strongest ones. After the funeral, we both said things that never should have been said, and stubbornness kept feeding wounds long after the reasons were dead. Yet every year that passed made the silence harder to explain, until regret became heavier than the memory of the pain. The storm finally moved eastward as dawn touched the Tennessee hills, and something inside me whisper maybe healing was possible still. I was 100 miles from forgiveness, and a lifetime from the man I should have been. 100 miles from forgiveness, wondering if grace could still let me in. 100 miles from forgiveness, with nothing left to defend. Just a broken heart driving toward a chance to become a brother again. Now every highway reminds me mercy begins. 100 miles from forgiveness. His porch light was still burning when I pulled into the drive. The same old farmhouse standing there beneath the morning light. He opened up the front door before I could find the words, then pulled me into his arms without saying a thing at first. I was 100 miles from forgiveness, but grace had traveled farther still, crossing every year of silence, every wound and every hill. 100 miles from forgiveness, and one embrace from home, where mercy met two stubborn hearts who were tired of being alone. Now every sunrise reminds me love can always mend, even when you're 100 miles from forgiveness. The coffee brewed inside the kitchen as morning filled the land, and for the first time in 15 years, we laugh like brothers again. The rain came down in sheets that night outside of Roswell, New Mexico. The highway looked like a river of headlights stretching where lost souls go. I'd been driving since Oklahoma, trying not to think too much about the marriage I had broken, or the people I'd given up. The dashboard clock read 1:17 as thunder rolled overhead, and every mile seemed heavier than the one I had just left. Then through the storm I saw it shining above an old roadside church, a neon cross glowing blue and red, like hope in the middle of hurt. The tires hummed against the pavement as the rain blurred all I could see. something about that glowing cross. Felt like it was calling me beneath the neon cross. I found something I thought I'd lost, a mercy bigger than my failures, a love that counted every cost. Beneath the neon cross, where the broken come to pray, God met me in the darkness and showed me there was still a way. Now every highway reminds me grace still shines beneath the neon cross. The church was nearly empty, just a janitor mopping floors and an elderly woman lighting candles near the sanctuary doors. I almost turned around and left like I'd done 100 times before, but exhaustion has a way of opening the heart's pride, keeps locked behind doors. I sat alone in silence, listening to the rain outside, thinking about all the years I spent trying to hide. Then the woman smiled and whispered, "Son, you're exactly where you need to be." And somehow those simple words broke something loose inside of me. The storm slowly moved eastward as the night grew calm again, and peace settled in that room like an unexpected friend. Beneath the neon cross, I found something I thought I'd lost, a mercy bigger than my failures, a love that counted every cost. Beneath the neon cross, where the broken come to pray, God met me in the darkness and showed me there was still a way. Now every highway reminds me grace still shines beneath the neon cross. No thunder spoke from heaven, no angel called my name, just a quiet invitation to stop carrying the shame. And maybe that's how healing happens, not with fireworks in the sky, but with one small step toward mercy when you've run out of reasons why. Beneath the neon cross, my life began to turn around, not because the road grew easier, but because my feet found solid ground. Beneath the neon cross, I finally understood that God's love reaches farther than any mistake ever could. Now every sunset reminds me of that rainy night. Beneath the neon cross, the church faded in my mirror as dawn painted the desert gold. But the light I found that evening never let me go. came down in sheets that night outside of Roswell, New Mexico. The highway looked like a river of headlights, stretching where lost souls go. I've been driving since Oklahoma, trying not to think too much about the marriage I had broken or the people I'd given up. The dashboard clock read 1:17 as thunder rolled overhead, and every mile seemed heavier than the one I had just left. And through the storm I saw it shining above an old roadside church, a neon cross glowing blue and red, like hope in the middle of hurt. The tires hummed against the pavement as the rain blurred all I could see. I crossed into Amarillo with half a tank and a heavy soul, $300 to my name, and a life spinning out of control. The Texas wind was blowing hard across the flat and open land, like it was trying to sweep away everything I couldn't understand. I'd spent the better part of 10 years running from what I should have faced, 1,000 miles of bad decisions and enough regret to fill the interstate. Every town looked like the last one, every night felt just the same, until the evening Amarillo unexpectedly changed my name. The sunset burned like fire across the western sky, and something in that moment made me stop and wonder why. Grace found me in Amarillo when I wasn't looking to be found, in a place between nowhere and nowhere else, where my showed me mercy still has a way of reaching broken lives. Now every mile reminds me God still moves the way grace found me in Amarillo. I checked into a roadside motel near the edge of town that night, the kind of place where truckers stop and travelers disappear from sight. Across the street a small church stood, its sign lit softly in the dark, Wednesday night prayer service written beneath the painted cross. I don't know what pulled me there, maybe maybe heaven finally got tired of watching me run away. But 30 minutes later, I walked through those old doors and found more peace inside that room than I'd known in years before. The choir sang a simple hymn, the kind my mother used to love, and suddenly I felt something when I wasn't looking to be found in a place between nowhere and nowhere else, where my world had finally broken down. Grace found me in Amarillo, beneath that Texas sky, and showed me mercy still has a way of reaching broken lives. Now every mile reminds me God still moves the way grace found me in Amarillo. The preacher never knew my story, yet every word cut through like God had followed every highway I'd ever wandered through. And when the invitation came, I walked down that aisle alone. But by the time I reached the altar, I wasn't carrying the weight on my own. Grace found me in Amarillo, and nothing has been the same. The roads are still uncertain, but now I know his name. Grace found me in Amarillo when I thought all hope was gone, and taught me redemption sometimes begins at the place you've run from longest all along. Now every sunrise reminds me how far God's love can go, the way grace found me in Amarillo. The Texas wind still blows there across the plains at night, and somewhere in Amarillo the church sign still shines bright. Bartender flipped the chairs up one by one across the floor. The neon beer sign flickered softly like it had 1,000 nights before. The regulars had all gone home, the jukebox finally fell silent too, and I sat alone near closing time with nothing left to lose. The pack was nearly empty, one cigarette remained, just enough to keep pretending that tomorrow might stay the same. Outside my old Ford pickup waited beneath the rain, like every road I'd ever traveled was leading here again. The clock struck 2:30 as thunder rolled somewhere west, and for the first time in forever I stopped running from the mess. It was the last cigarette before redemption, the last lie I told myself, the last excuse for staying broken, the last thing standing between me and hell, the last grace can be, to the last cigarette before redemption. My daughter turned 13 that spring, and I missed another birthday again, because a bottle had become more important than the father I should have been. My ex-wife stopped calling months ago. The silence said enough, and every mirror in every motel room reflected someone hard to trust. I carried guilt like luggage across county lines and years, trying to bury shame beneath whiskey, but it always reappeared. The truth was sitting with me at that bar stool all alone, waiting for the moment I admitted I'd been wrong. The rain tapped on the windows like a voice I couldn't ignore, and something deep inside me finally opened the door. It was the last cigarette before redemption, the last lie I told myself, the last excuse for staying broken, the last thing standing between me and help. The last cigarette before redemption, burning down beneath the night, as mercy waited patiently just beyond the neon light. Now every breath reminds me how close grace can be, to the last cigarette before redemption. Yeah. I crushed it in the ashtray and stared at the glowing end, thinking how strange it felt to finally surrender instead. Then I bowed my head in silence with no fancy words to say, just a broken man asking God to show him another way. It was the last cigarette before redemption, the moment everything began. Not because my problems vanished, but because grace took my hand. The last cigarette before redemption, and the first step toward the light, where forgiveness met the wreckage of a life spent trying to fight. Now every sunrise reminds me of that rainy night, and the last cigarette before redemption. The storm had passed by morning as I climbed into my truck, and for the first time in years I believed change was possible enough. The vacancy sign was flickering outside room 23, a cheap motel somewhere in New Mexico, where nobody planned to be. The wallpaper peeled from the corners, air conditioner barely worked, and every inch of that little room looked like life had already lived first. I had driven 12 hours straight with nowhere left to go. A divorce finalized that morning, and a bank account running low. The future felt like an empty highway, stretching beyond what I could see. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep driving. The rain tapped softly on the window as midnight filled the room, and loneliness sat beside me like a shadow I couldn't move. The motel Bible saved my life on a night when hope was gone, when the weight of every failure felt too heavy to carry on. The motel Bible saved my life, though it looked worn and old, because somewhere in those pages God reached into my soul. Now every road reminds me grace still arrives on time, through a motel Bible that saved my life. I almost missed it sitting there inside the nightstand drawer, the same little Bible thousands had seen and probably ignored before. But something made me open it to a page I'd never planned, and the words felt less like scripture than a letter written by God's hand. We spoke about the weary, the burdened and the lost, the kind of people who know regret and understand the cost. Every verse seemed to know me, every line felt painfully true, like heaven had been waiting years for me to finally read through. The storm grew quiet outside as tears fell onto the page, and for the first time in forever I felt something start to change. The motel Bible saved my life on a night when hope was gone, when the weight of every failure felt too heavy to carry on. The motel Bible saved my life, though it looked worn and old, because somewhere in those pages God reached into my soul. Now every road reminds me grace still arrives on time, through a motel Bible that saved my life. No angels filled the room that night, no thunder shook the sky, no miracle unfolded before my very eyes. Just a peace I couldn't explain, settling deep within, like mercy had finally found me where I've been hiding all alone. The motel Bible saved my life and changed the road ahead, not because it fixed my problems, but because it raised what I thought was dead. The motel Bible saved my life and showed me where to start, when God took words on paper and planted hope inside my heart. Now every Bible saved my life. The sun rose over New Mexico as I packed my things to leave, and for the first time in years I believed there was still something worth believing. Church parking lot was crowded when I pulled in late that day. A dusty Ford with a cracked windshield and years I couldn't wash away. The old ladies by the entrance looked twice when I walked through, because small towns remember everything, and they remembered me too. I used to be the kid who fought outside the county fair, the young man who left town angry, certain he didn't care. Then one bad choice became another, and another after that, until my name became a warning for fathers raising sons like that. The bell rang through the valley, the sunlight crossed the floor, and for the first time in forever I stepped through those old doors. It was the outlaw Sunday morning, the day I came back home, the day grace met a wanderer who'd spent too many years alone. The outlaw Sunday morning, when sinner back without asking where he'd been to hide. Now every Sunday reminds me no road is too far gone for an outlaw Sunday morning. Mama sat 3 pews ahead, her Bible resting in her hands. She turned around and saw me there, and immediately began to stand. The tears came before the words did, as she wrapped her arms around me tight, like she'd been praying for this moment every single day and night. The preacher started preaching about the prodigal son, and I couldn't help but laugh a little at what the Lord had done, because every sentence sounded like it had been written for me, about men who spend their whole lives running from the people they were meant to be. The choir sang Amazing Grace, and the old wooden walls seemed alive as decades of regret and sorrow finally started losing their fight. It was the outlaw Sunday morning, the day I came back home, the day grace met a wanderer who'd spent too many years alone. The outlaw Sunday morning, when mercy broke through pride, and God welcomed a sinner back without asking where he'd been to hide. Now every Sunday reminds me no road is too far gone for an outlaw Sunday morning. I spent years believing lies that shame could never be undone, that God might forgive other people but not a man like this one. Yet heaven has a way what broken hearts forget. Mercy is bigger than our failures, and grace is stronger than regret. It was the outlaw Sunday morning, and my life began again. Not because the past disappeared, but because forgiveness stepped in. The outlaw Sunday morning, when God rewrote my name, and every mile behind me stopped defining who I became. Now every sunrise reminds me what redemption can become. On an outlaw Sunday morning, the church bell echoed softly across the county fields that day. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to drive away.